This is a book of spells to be spoken aloud. It tells its stories and sings its songs in paint and word. Here you will find incantations and summoning charms, spells that protect and spells that protest, tongue twisters, blessings, lullabies and songs. Here you might swoop with a swallow, follow a seal through the sea, or sky race with swifts. Here you can listen with owls and watch with the eyes of an oak. Here a fox might witch into your mind, or flocks of moths may lift from the page to fill the air. Loss is the tune of our age, hard to miss and hard to bear. Creatures, places and words disappear, day after day, year on year. To enchant means both to make magic and to sing out. So let these spells ring far and wide, speak their words and seek their art. Let the wild world into your eyes, your voice, your heart.
Red Fox. I am Red Fox. How do you see me? A bloom of rust at your vision's edge, the shadow that slips through a hole in the hedge. My two green eyes in your headlights rush, a scatter of feathers, the tip of a brush. I am Red Fox, when do you hear me? A scream in the night that stops you dead, dark, torn from dark, a bolt through the head. My sorrowful love song howled to my lover, my trash can clatter from twilight's cover. I am Red Fox, where do you find me? In cots and spinney, ginnel and alley, for I haunt city as I haunt valley, climbing the fellside, crossing the pass, walking the high street bold as brass. I am Red Fox. What do you call me? Shifter of shapes and garbage raider, bearer of fire and space invader, taker of risks and riddle maker, messenger, trickster, curfew breaker. I am Red Fox. Why do you need me? I am your double, your ghost, your other, the spirit of wild, the spirit of weather. Red is my fur, and red is my art, and red is the blood of your animal heart.
Wow. Good evening, everyone, wherever you are, thousands of you from around the world. This is the launch party for The Lost Spells by Robert Macfarlane and Jackie Morris. It's going to be an amazing evening. We're going to have a lovely hour in each other's company. Book launches used to be stuffy affairs with sort of 80 chin-stroking literary types in a hot, overcrowded bookshop, and now they're these lovely universal democratic things bringing together people from all around the world. So welcome wherever you are. Thank you very much to Number 7 Dulverton for making those lovely films that gives a bit of an insight into The Lost Spells and the making of it. Those of you who bought books with your tickets, Waterstones are shipping those out to you right now. Today is the first day this momentous book has been published. Now I'm sure there'll be lots of time for you guys to get involved tonight as well. So it's really important that you're not shy and you use the Q&A facility and send us loads of questions. We're going to spend at least the last 15 minutes going through as many of your questions as we can. They will be moderated, but we will get to as many as you can. If you want to, say how old you are, particularly if you're a young person, and maybe you might want to say where you're from as well, because the Lost Words, of course, has been this international success. It's found fans and readers all over the world. So do say where you're from if you'd like to. Also, please join us on social media. This is a kind of social media thing, isn't it? And so many of you made amazing videos of the Lost Word spells, and so maybe you'll make some more for the Lost spells. I'm sure you will. Join us and we can continue the conversation and continue the enchantment on social media for days and hours afterwards. Now, I'm sure Robert and Jackie need no introduction to you, but I am going to introduce them. Rob is kind of single-handedly really created the whole genre of British nature writing through his brilliant writing and his thinking. And he's one of these rare things in Britain. He's a public intellectual who really stimulates debate and thinking and sparks off all kinds of cultural collaborations, as well as being an increasingly influential environmental activist. Jackie lives in a little house by the sea and has written and illustrated more than 40 books that have sold more than 1 million copies around the world. Incredible thing. And she's particularly moved by the sound and the shape of birds, and she brings her amazing artistic sensibilities to the Lost Words and the Lost Spells. Now, I'm sure many of you remember this, the Lost Words. 3 years ago, Rob and Jackie collaborated on this incredible book, and I'm sure they didn't think at the time it was going to become a cultural phenomenon. I know that's true, that it is a cultural phenomenon, because I wrote that it was in The Guardian, but it became this film and this theatre event, and it triggered off jigsaw puzzles and then this incredible campaign that people raised with their own money to get it into 3/4 of British primary schools, every school in Scotland, every hospice in the country, and hospital walls have been decorated with murals of the Lost Words. So the Lost Words you remember and love, of course, is this enormous book, and the Lost Spells, there we are, is its little sister, cheeky little sister. And it's this lovely thing that you can take out into the world. It's 20 gorgeous spells that are meant to be read aloud, but the most beautiful poetry that you can read in your own mind. So this is flying out into the world today. So Rob and Jackie, how do you feel about this one, about this little beauty?
Hello everyone, hello Patrick, hello thousands of people, speaking to you from a little hut at the bottom of the garden. Jackie?
Yes,
how
Rob?
are you? Yeah, just letting you say hi. Wave to
okay. My name's Jackie Morris. I'm 59 and I'm in Wales. That was what we were supposed to say, wasn't it?
That was what we were supposed to say.
Yeah. How do you feel? I feel incredibly nervous.
Yes, very nervous, very nervous. It's a strange thing when you've worked on something for two and a bit years, and then it wings out into the wild, something like that.
Can I ask you, what was the starting point? When did you decide that you were going to do a kind of second album, as it were?
The difficult second album.
This is a difficult second question as well, though, because we got two different answers to this. So, Rob, you go first.
Well, I think we just kept writing really and painting, because we liked doing it so much that we just sort of carried on after the Lost Spells, after the Lost Words, I beg your pardon. And one of the early poems I wrote, spells I wrote, was Goldfinch. Which the first line of which is, "God knows the world needs all the good it can get right now." I think I wrote that line in 2017, but it feels even truer now. I mean, Trump was president when I wrote it, and that wasn't far from my mind, and neither was my grandmother, now passed away, who was well over 100 when I was sitting with her while she was sleeping and thinking about these things and what she'd seen. So so one of the things that I've found with this book is that spells that were written and paintings that were completed some time ago have taken on new echoes and new resonance in the time that's passed since then. So that's my answer.
Jackie, what's yours?
My answer was that we did carry on. It was hard to let go, and I was a bit nagging actually at times, wasn't I? I'd throw in things like, "Can you do me a silver birch, please, Rob? Can you do me a hair? You haven't done me a brown hair yet. Can I have a brown hair, please?" And my idea had been, neither of us had an interest in doing a second book because we were working on Book of Birds. And I was going to do a series of paintings where Rob would write on the paintings and maybe we'd put together a portfolio or something. And then we were commissioned by the BBC to do the prom in the Albert Hall, which was astonishing. And Red Fox came out, and I could see how that could fit together differently into a book that was much smaller. So that was only August last year, Rob. You'd already written, I don't know, snow hare, owl, barn owl,
goldfinch,
egret,
grey seal, egret.
Yeah. So we took the idea of doing this smaller book to Hamish Hamilton and said, we know we're supposed to be working on birds, but we've had this idea to do this small book of 12 spells. And Hamish Hamilton said yes. And we discussed sizes. It was originally just a tiny bit smaller. But then 12 spells became 21. And this was me painting in about September until February, and Rob writing, and the book getting longer. So that's kind of how I remember it happening. It was organic in its birth, and also right up to the very last, in that we had a PDF, and Silver Birch went over 4 spreads, but actually it needed to be longer in order to breathe, and we begged some time from Hamish Hamilton, who gave it to us, so that it became this lengthy lullaby at the end.
Did you argue over what you were going to include? Did one of you say, "I want a badger in there," and the other one? No.
We never argue, do we, Rob?
No, we don't. No, we don't. Jackie's one of our best friends. We occasionally bicker, but we never argue. Yeah. No, well, yeah. I think the creatures, the plants, the trees, they sort of named themselves to us, really. They're those that we love. Gannet, Jackie lives near Gannets and lives above a beach where seal mothers come in to pup. And curlews, birds I love very much. And I think we realised that some of these were threatened. So the snow hare, the curlew, moths generally suffering. The moth snowstorm, as it's called, is thinning, and some of them are like goldfinch, are just wonderful signs of hope of what can happen, how a species can bounce back, turn around. So yeah, it's that mix of wonder and love and loss, I think, that runs through them all.
I do remember laughing so much though when you wrote woodpecker, because you had the pneumatic drills outside. And they'd been in the road for weeks, you said, didn't you? And I was sat in my house with my goldfinches outside and jackdaws, and you can hear the wind through a raven's wing. And when I started working on the artwork, the builders started next door. And
I should explain this as a spell about a woodpecker pecking very, very noisily at a tree trunk and keeping a badger awake. So yeah.
Well, I became a very grumpy badger.
There's that lovely conversation in that spell between the badger and the woodpecker. It's great, yeah. And it's interesting, Rob, that you said there about the sort of tonal balance, because obviously you've gone for a balance of plants and charismatic birds and nearby nature and the things, iconic nature and everyday nature. But there's also a lovely balance here of kind of joy and exhilaration and fun, but also sadness and protest too. But is now a good time to do a spell?
Yes, well, I'm going to try and read Jackdaw for you, I think, which I've only read once before. So Jackdaw's, I'm going to say now that if any young person can memorize Jackdaw and then film themselves speaking it from memory and then post it to me on Twitter, I will send you I will send you a prize, a present, and you'll hear why that might be a challenge when I try and read it. So this is only the second time I've read it aloud. Okay, and jackdaws, obviously, as we all know, these wonderful, convivial and cheery, companionable, flocking birds, and they have that pew pew, that kind of very high tinging, chattering call. So here goes with a jackdaw spell for you. Jackdaw, circling the back door, showing off your knack for, letting rip that high core, cutting like a hacksaw through the evening's calm core, giving it the jaw. Always with the comeback, coal black crackerjack, joker of the haystack, ready with the wisecrack, giving it the back chat. Castle clatterer, silent shatterer, tractor, troubadour, talker and squawker in fable and folklore from farmyard to seashore, giving it the nevermore. King of the chimney stack, the belfry bivouac, bright-eyed steeplejack from church tower to tarmac, giving it the snicker snack. Don't call her crow or rook or raven, for she is jackdaw, grey-headed outlaw, fighting the class war, dipping down on quick wings to hijack a wedding ring or ransack a knick-knack or snatch up a gimcrack while giving it the guff for. As dusk darkens, jackdaws gather to shake out feathers, jam-pack the brickwork, pick through the tide rack, nestle in the bedstraw, duck through the trapdoor, fussick on the barn floor, bushwhack the ivy, gossip in the sycamore, this close to sleep, still giving it the click-clack. Why not learn the jackdaw beatbox, the jackdaw seesaw, the jackdaw uproar, the zigzag, rip-rap, jackdaw soundtrack, pulling on the ripcord, furthermore and evermore, giving it the chainsaw, the whip-crack, the hee-haw, giving it the wherefore, the whyfor, the therefore, the jackdaw. I'm going to have a cup of tea now. Bye, everyone.
We definitely want to see some young rappers out there giving it their interpretation of that. No offence to your interpretation, Rob. That was brilliant. Very impressive.
No, I'm a terrible reader. There are people who are going to be able to do the jackdaw rip rap much better than me.
Jackie, do your pictures ever shape Rob's words? Do you the things that you produce then shape the spells and the flow of them?
I think they do, so, but I'm not entirely certain. I know with the Lost Words, Rob was struggling with Dandelion, and I painted ahead of him that time. And there was something about this kind of clock-shaped leaf thing that I did that kicked off the rhythm in that one. I tell you what he did to me this time, though. The book is very small, and so you have to keep a really big balance in your head of image and words. And he, after I'd done the artwork for Snow Hare, he completely rewrote the spell, which was like having the ground moved from underneath your feet, really. I was very lucky that everything fitted together okay. But please don't do that again, Rob.
Understood.
Yeah.
Jackie shapes the spell so much. Not only when I see the artwork as it comes through, but also she's a beautiful poet in prose herself, and she'll know what I'm working on. She'll send me these texts or emails or WhatsApp messages that just have thoughts in them, and they're beautiful thoughts, and they settle in my mind, and they become amazingly powerful forces. And then she'll often send me sketches of how something might look or spread across the page, because one of the key differences with this book is that it tells its stories often across many pages. The spells are spread out, unlike the Lost Words, where there were always three spreads. So Jackie has this amazing instinct for how image and word work together across pages and across books, and I've learned so much from that.
But that was a difficult one, though, because I had an instinct that Swift would work in that way. As you turn the pages, I mean, some of the pages ask to be turned more slowly than others. Obviously, Swift doesn't, but it's whether it would work in that. But I had this feeling. I mean, maybe it's because I do learn them by heart to paint with them later. But just putting them, there's something very intimidating when you've got a book of poetry which is just kind of solid like this. It's quite intimidating for somebody like me who has dyslexia to read. But when you give words space, it's much more inviting in, I think. And I think the way that this book and the other book work is there's the words and the images, and we both work on those together. So we would talk like about the silver birch spell. Rob wanted this silver seeker going through the pages, and at first it was a deer, but then it became the red fox to bookend the book. So there's the space between the words and the images, and that's where the reader fits, and that's where the book starts to have a pulse. Yeah.
Can I ask you about the track listing, as it were, like how you came up with the order of things? And again, is that a kind of tonal thing that you wanted to kind of bring people up and then have a little down bit and then another up bit? And, you know, is it emotional thing, or is it subject matter, or species?
I think we wanted it to have I don't know quite what you would call it, an emotional contouring.
But it's a visual rhythm as well.
And a visual rhythm.
Yeah.
Yes, long and short often, so that we tried not to set, for example, 3 long spells hard by one another, and mix comedy and sad. I mean, as it were, the saddest spells are probably curlew and swallow, possibly thrift, and then there's plucky, spiky gorse, and then there's the woodpecker and the badger, the sort of Flanders and Swan dialogue and so forth. So yeah, and then the red fox is begin and end the book. Jackie, do you want to read Silver Birch now?
Swallow really packs an emotional punch.
Swallow. Oh, good. I'm very happy to know that.
I mean, that was amazing. When you come across, I shouldn't spoil it for all the readers, but when you come across that, I wasn't really expecting it. It's like that terribly tragic, weepy ballad at the end of an album. I know I keep returning to that analogy. Jackie, would you like to get readers a spell?
It feels strange reading Silver Birch at this point, because it's like lullaby. It's time for bed now. And it has the witchy birch eyes in it, which I quite like putting like that. So this is Silver Birch. Snow is falling, my silver seeker. Soon the path will be lost to sight. Soon the day will give way to night. Ice is forming, my silver seeker. Soon the streams will be fastened tight. Soon the shadows will claim the light. Look over your shoulder at where you have been. The edge of the woods can no longer be seen. Vast is the forest, slender your track, harder it grows to find your way back. Even as the dusk grows dimmer, still the birch trunks glow like torches, still the birch bark holds its glimmer. Rest your head now, silver seeker, close your eyes and cease your searches, where the blackbird brightly perches, where the catkin softly brushes, here among the gleaming birches. Break of dawn is far away, but you are safe, my silver sleeper, safe to sink down deep and deeper. In the night the birches watch you with their black and blinking eyes, standing guard and keeping vigil while you make your dreaming journey. Round and round the dangers prowl, wolves and monsters, worries, witches, but the birches stand like churches as the dark around them surges. Circles, crouches, clutches, lunges, but breaks its power on birches' branches. Held at bay until at last the sun emerges, warms the pines, the larches, lights your yawns, your stretches, here among the silver birches. And actually what bookends this book is not the fox but the blackbird, which is Rob singing in the darkness.
Oh wow, Jackie, what amazing reading again. Bravo for that. That's sort of brought it to a whole new light for me. It's got such kind of mystic power. Wonderful. And I love those spooky eyes too. I wanted to ask you about them, but you've already mentioned them. Rob, could I ask you about, because the lost spells aren't just poems, spells of enchantment, but there's a protest spell in there too, and one that many watchers may know the story behind. But tell me a little bit about Heartwood for those who don't know.
Yes, I will. I'll just add as a pendant to that beautiful silver birch reading from Jackie that spell was the last we finished, and we finished it. I finished writing it. Jackie finished painting it as the pandemic was growing, as the storm, the monsters really were surging and circling outside, and it became a spell about taking shelter. Yes, Heartwood, people may know, I wrote as a gift, as a spell of protection, a charm against harm, we called it, but it is also a protest poem for the trees and the people of Sheffield at the time when that great and eventually successful, magnificent campaign of creativity and imagination, improvisation was being waged by the citizens of Sheffield on behalf of their co-citizens, the thousands of trees of Sheffield that were threatened with unjust felling by a dismal contract between a multinational contractor and Sheffield City Council. And that spell Heartwood, which is out there on the internet, anyone can use it, set it, sing it, print it, it's free. I gave it, and it ended up being used in tree protests around the world, including in India, and was wonderfully sung by Corinne Polwart and the other spell song singers. So it's been lovely to see what happens when you give a work of writing, as it were. Because I'm a writer, I'm useless basically. All I can do is hand words over and see if they can make any difference in the world. And Heartwood did something a little bit like that. It's been very exciting to watch. So yeah, it's there for anyone who needs it if they have a tree faced with unjust felling. And as we know, there's a fair bit of that going on at the moment for one reason or another. HS2.
Absolutely, it's sort of, it's going to be used over and over again, I predict, for decades. But that rather nicely brings us on to music, doesn't it? Because all your spells have been turned into so many wonderful and different forms of music, and we have a piece of music from one of your new spells now, don't we? Rob, do you want to introduce it actually, because it's Cosmo Sheldrake, who is a musician I know you admire and have collaborated with very creatively in recent times.
Yes, so just very briefly, so there's a very short spell called the Beach Spell, which I wrote partly up at the Beechwoods near my house, and the first line is "Beach gives wind speech." And Cosmo Sheldrake, who I think is listening this evening, will be known to many of you, I think, but if not, do seek out his extraordinary, hooky, strange, magnificent music, which folds a lot of field recordings. He's a multi-instrumentalist, and he makes fabulous, strange music, including a new album out of the calls and songs of endangered British birds. So, and Cosmo has wonderfully set the Beach Spell. So we're going to hear a premiere of that now.
Beach gives wind gives, wind gives wind speech. Beach gives wind gives, wind gives wind speech. Beach gives wind gives, wind gives wind speech. Gives wind speech, gives wind gives, gives wind gives wind speech. Each branch reaches to other branches as the gale rises. Each leaf dances with other leaves as the storm crashes. Can you hear that inland sea? Its slow explosion. Its slow explosion. Its slow explosion. High in the hillwoods, huge surf breaks far from any ocean.
Bravo, bravo, Cosmo. And you can find that on Spotify and other music streaming services next week. And also check out Cosmo's amazing album of that's made entirely from bird calls, the calls and songs of endangered British birds. So give that a listen, give that a Google, and stream it on Spotify or other streaming services are available. But that brings us nicely to music, Rob and Jackie. And you know, one of the amazing legacies of the Lost Words is the extraordinary musicians who then collaborated with your words and your images. And in particular, we had the Spell Songs album, which is such a beautiful thing. And we are actually going to hear one of those tracks to play us out at the end of tonight. But tell us a bit, Rob and Jackie, about how that came about, how all those musical collaborations came about. Were they people you already knew, or was it the Lost Words that brought you all together?
Jackie.
Rob and I were at Hay Winter Festival talking about the Lost Words, and we had the most beautiful piece of music to play us in to events, which was Kerry Andrew singing the Wren Spell. Rob had sent it to her and just asked her to read it, but she sent back instead this glorious piece of music. And in the audience was a lady called Caroline Slough, and her and Adam have a company, Folk by the Oak, put on a folk festival every year. And Caroline took our book home. She said she got fed up of waiting in the signing queue because it was about 2.5 hours long. And she took the book home, and the next morning persuaded Adam that they should get together what is actually a kind of super group of folk people. You know, I've listened to Corinne Polwart all my working life, almost. She's actually too young for it to be all my working life. Sekou Keita, absolutely adore his music. Chris Drever, wonderful. Rachel Newton, Beth Porter from the Bookshop Bands. I knew them from Bath. Jim Molyneux, Rachel Newton, who's so easy to make her cry. She's probably crying now listening to this. And Julie Fowlis. Did I say Jim Molyneux? Amazing. And in this house near Hay-on-Wye, they gathered together, and I watched them using our book, collaborating, stepping up and speaking, stepping back. This was kind of peak Brexit time, and there was all sorts of stuff going on. But the noise that came out of Mornington House was much more beautiful than the noise that comes out of Westminster. It was people collaborating together creatively and working to make something very positive and beautiful. And in about 8 days, they made an amazing recording, and then we went on to perform in Suffolk and Birmingham and Manchester and London. It's astonishing sharing a stage with these people.
And so has the same thing already happened with the Lost Spells? Have you already had the same group of musicians compose more music for that, or are you expecting more to develop organically?
They will, yes, wonderfully. I'm very happy to say tonight that that the same group of musicians will gather this January, or circumstances permitting, and we'll make a second album, that difficult second album, in which will gather in response to some of the spells that weren't, as it were, sung from the Lost Words, and then to the new book as well. But yes, I mean, you've got those otters behind you, Patrick, that I know Jackie painted for you, and Jackie's got a couple behind her. But our book, or the ideas of the book, which are more important than the book itself, sometimes seem like otters. They tumble and turn and twist into something new, a new form. And really at the heart of this is not the book. It's about nature now, how much we need it, how poor we are often at realizing that, or at least acting on that realization. And this strange doubleness of the pandemic at either end, where in that great deafening April of birdsong that we could hear with ears we'd never had before, and green became the color that we drank to keep us alive, and our spirits moving in that hardest of times. And then at the other end, we spilt out of lockdown and ran for the hills and the coasts and trashed them in many ways. And so I think I'm a very great believer in education from the earliest ages, and I think we can only really grow our way towards a better relationship in this very, very nature depleted country of ours, in Britain and beyond. So we, this that's at the heart of all of this, really, for me.
Do you think it's happening, Rob and Jackie? And that, I don't want to be trite and sort of offer false hope, but if you look at the lost words, that was a response to the excision of all these words from the Oxford Junior Dictionary, and you've brought them back to life, and people have jumped on them and added life to them. And there's such a hunger, isn't there, to connect with species other than ourselves and landscapes that aren't built by ourselves. And I know it's been an overworn cliche of lockdown, but that's just been gathering momentum over the last few years, and I believe that this is really part of it, and a really joyous, important part of it that shows that joy can be political too. But I mean, does that bring you a bit of hope too, that energy that you've seen from your creative work?
I'm skeptical really. I do feel that I'm afraid that the pandemic has cost crucial months and crucial feelings as well. I think when we look back, if we're able to look back from a climate crisis perspective, this will be seen as a time of disaster from that perspective, I'm afraid, rather than a time when we saw what happened when the anthropopause occurred. And I'm also somewhat skeptical of overclaiming for culture, not least because once you start telling culture what it must do or can do, then it stops doing those things almost immediately. So I'd sort of prefer to leave it wild and just see what happens. But I know the heart is there, but translating that into landscape and change is a harder thing, as we all know.
We've got loads of. Sorry, Jackie. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm skeptical and horrified by what grown-ups do, but I'm also aware that children have the most amazing minds, and the work that I've seen coming back from schools with not just people drawing, but the writing that's coming out of schools, the children finding their own voices through lessons that they've done and things that they've done with the lost words, and hopefully will continue to do with the lost spells, is astonishing. I think in many ways they have been working to educate their parents. When the lost words came out, film crews went into schools and asked if children knew certain words, and they didn't. I really wanted them to go into factories, because I've met so many adults who say to me, "What is a weasel?" We take it for granted that because we know it, other people know it. And I
don't always know it. I mistook a fly agaric mushroom for a piece of watermelon. Yeah. So.
I love that moment very much. That's one of my favourite. Yeah.
We're getting so many amazing questions coming in, much better than my questions. So we're going to move to them. But let's first of all watch another lovely film and another lovely spell, a very beautiful spell about moths. And I think it's going to come up right now. And then we'll crack on and get as many of your questions in as we can. But do keep your questions coming too. Here is Moths.
Moth. This one soft word falls so far short of what the moth world means. Of moths in number, birthed by dark, to flock round torch and lamp and porch. Together, thickening air to froth, then cloth, then weather. Open up the soft word's wings, and out rush names and forms, a broth of colours, cinnabar and scarlet tiger, frosted green and angle shade, bordered pearl and tamarisk plume, diamond back and clouded silver. Thinner and thinner wears the cloth. However, moths pass out of sight, beyond belief, their absence briefly noted, if at all, as distant memory, half-forgotten grief. Hold moth names in mouth and mind a while. Satin lutestring, willow ermine, feathered thorn and seraphim, forester and dusky clearwing. Sing them out into the night to give moths back their range, their flight.
Another beautiful film there. Right, we're going to crack on with all your amazing questions that are coming in. First of all, why have you called them spells and not poems? And that's from Finn, who's 10, and Theo, who's 7 in Cheltenham.
Hello, Finn. Hello, Theo. Thanks for watching. I hope we haven't been too boring. It's a great question. The main answer is I am not a poet. I say it loud and sure. I know poets, and they're really poets. So I just write spells, and that's the only thing I can do. But the other reason they're spells is because they spell out the word usually. So the first letter of each stanza or each verse, each line, is the first is the consecutive letters of the name. So beach gives wind speech is the first line of the beach spell, and that begins with a B. Each branch reaches to other branches is the E of the beach, and so on and so forth. So that's why they're spells, but also hopefully because they might conjure things back or up.
Caroline Smithson says, I was put under a spell today by a hoopoo in Leeds.
Wow.
When was the last time you were put under a spell by nature? And Caroline, she gives her age too. She's 56 from Kippax near Leeds. Thank you, Caroline.
You saw a hoopoo in Leeds? Oh my goodness. I'd have driven north for that. I've only ever seen one in Greece. Not in. Wow, that's incredible. Jackie, when were you last put under a spell?
Well, we had a hoopoo in the back garden once, and 2 turtle doves in the farmyard, which was astonishing. I think there's only 1 pair of turtle doves in Wales, and they were in the farmyard next door. But kind of every day, even, you know, the toad that lives in the porch that sometimes I find in the dog bowl, just the colour of the sky, the sound of a raven's wings as it flies over. Today, watching the rain out on the horizon. Yeah.
Lovely.
Always.
Another question. Hi, my name is Freya and I'm 10 from Cambridgeshire. Do you think that your book will encourage children and adults alike to take a break and go into the wild?
Thanks, Freya. I really hope so. One of the different things about this book is that where the other book was big enough that you could use it as a rain shelter or a bird hide or even a coffee table if you screwed 4 legs to it, this one is technically small enough that you can sort of stick it in your pocket or your pack or your bag. And so we thought of it. Somebody described it as an artful field guide, or I think the other day, and that made me happy, because if it means you can see and name and know some of the creatures in here, that's the beginning, really, of where it all starts. And Jackie, I don't want to do that annoying thing of holding things up, but Jackie painted this amazing glossary. So all the species in here are named at the very end, and so you can find them and go on a hunt for them in the world and in the pages.
There are so many treasures in this book, and little wheat ears hidden away, and you're suddenly like, oh, well, what's that moth? And there was a lime hawk moth. I love that moth. So brilliant. Look, we'll crack on with the questions. Lovely question here from Leslie in Angus. Thank you for this, Leslie. She lives in the north of Angus in Scotland and has loved the natural world all her life. And she says, I find great solace in it. Most recently, almost a spiritual experience, watching and hearing the thousands of pink-foot geese who overwinter here. It happens every year, and I feel a real connection with these amazing creatures and are lifted by them. Do either of you have a particular bird or animal with which you connect in this way?
Jackie?
I have swallows, waiting for that first swallow, but also watching the last ones go. And I kind of measure my clock by creatures. The wheatears come in about February, and the seals breed on the beaches in July and August. And, but cuckoo, hearing the cuckoo. This year there were so many cuckoos, and we saw them as well, which is lovely because you often hear them but don't often see them. That was amazing.
I share that love of the migrating geese. Was that famous incident where the plane went over in Antarctica and all the penguins leaned back to look at it and then fell on their backs. I'm never sure if that's apocryphal or not, but I'm a bit like that with migrating geese. I kind of end up following them and then toppling back. But yes, I think probably the snow bunting is one of the birds that means most to me, because I meet it up on the mountain tops and I know it's come in from Greenland or the Siberian tundra, and they're such cheery, tiny birds. They're beautiful plump birds, and they flutter in sort of -20 and very cheery and bright, and then blizzard off into the white, and you've lost them again.
This is a related question for Jackie. What is your favourite animal or thing to draw? And that's from Kitty, who's 10.
Favourite animal? Anything that's not human. I love painting snow leopards. Birds, I love the shape of birds. Really hard to catch them because they move so swiftly. And I try to imagine what it must have been like before photography, because now we can hold that shape with fast shutter speed photography. But when people used to draw them years ago, they didn't have that. They could only work from dead birds, which I also do. You know, if I find anything, tend to paint it, take it home. I'll stop there.
A question for Robert. Robert, how old were you when you started writing poetry? You see, a lot of your fans think you write poetry, and that's from Pippa in Suffolk, who is 8. Good evening, Pippa. Thanks for joining us.
Hey Pippa, yes, so lovely to have these questions coming in from younger members of the audience. Thank you for being here. Well, I think my mum and dad are on this call out there somewhere, and so they hold the folder with all my terrible poems in. But yeah, I was definitely starting to try and write poems when I was a little bit, just a year or two older than you probably. And there's a notorious one about a mountain lion stalking a penguin. Those penguins again, which is, but you know, ecologically, but all wrong, just wrong in so many ways. So, but that's where I began. And then I wrote a terrible poem about a mountain like a wedding cake when I was about 16 and should have known better. So yeah, I had to write prose to get terrible poetry out of my system before I could turn to spells.
One day all these will be collected in some kind of malicious biography of you. There's an amazing question here from Joe. Wands can help to cast spells. If you had to pick a wood to make a wand out of to cast the lost spells, what wood would you craft your wand from, and why? What a question!
Such a good question. Well, I do make wands. I cut them for my children and other people's children when I'm with them, and just whittle them away. And I so many. I mean, I think probably hawthorn. It's a really witchy wood. Very hard to find a straight enough piece of hawthorn. And they're those big old thorns that lean over where the coastal wind blows them round Jackie's and stand strong on the fells and the hilltops. So yeah, a hawthorn wand for me.
And for me, I don't know, because I would have said ash, but I've just fallen in love with aspen trees. which I met 3 the other day, and I can't quite get them out of my head. But I think that's more about the way the leaves are joined to the stem, and how birch-like they look, but how different they are. Yes.
This is a lovely question. Another one for you, Jackie. It's from Florence, who is a tired 5-year-old. Florence,
Oh.
thank you for hanging with us this late. Hello, Jackie. Are there any animals or birds or plants or trees that you have never painted and wish you could?
So many. Never painted. I mean, I'm not very good at hyenas, but I would love to paint African wild dogs with their big ears. But for me, I guess it works best with me when I'm more familiar with things, which is why I think there's so much heart and soul in the lost words and the lost spells, because these are things that I see most days. You know, and I've held a barn owl on my wrist, felt the weight of it, seen kingfishers darting. I'd like to paint a kingfisher well. I don't think I've quite managed that yet, but you know, that's just how it goes. You know, you're constantly trying to get the right thing. They're never light enough, the ones that I've done. They're such tiny things. They're so delicate. They're so bright. They're so swift. And I don't feel like I've got that yet in a painting.
This is a question from Anne, and it's to both of you. Do you have any particular music that you like to listen to and that inspires you when you're creating?
Jackie?
Do you know, I used to listen to a lot of things all the time, and the older I get, the harder I find to listen to anything while I'm actually working. I'm finding that I need to concentrate more and more, but also, I guess, I am listening to the birdsong outside when the builders aren't there, which they're not now. They've gone, thank goodness. It's a level of concentration that is more than I used to put into my work, I guess. I do sometimes listen to podcasts and speech. I can't listen to talking if I'm writing, but when I'm painting, I can. And I do love folk music because it's got stories wrapped up in it.
I listen to music all the time in my head and, as it were, with my ears. But I think my son asked me, whose music would you take to the river and to the island with you? And it's definitely Johnny Flynn's. I know every note of every song I think he's ever played and performed and written, and just inexhaustible to me.
Nice question here from Sharon Lashley. I'm looking forward to speaking the lost spells out loud in various settings. I have to say, just to butt in here on Sharon's point, I was volunteering at a forest school, and we read Ivy from the Lost Words under some ivy in midwinter, and it kind of trebled its power. It was an amazing thing. Jackie and Rob, do you have a particular favourite spell and a location and a setting in which you say it?
I'm laughing because sometimes I will send the spells, like early drafts of the spells, to Jackie, and I'll say, here's here's curlew for you. Would you leave your house and go out to the airfield and read it? If when you think the curlews might, or with the gannet spell, I was like, could you make sure you're on a cliff edge when you read this? Besides this kind of control freak telling you where to read them aloud, but I still love reading Otter. I think that's probably Otter by Water is the one that tumbles in my mouth most easily.
And the moth spell came to me with strict instructions to take it out into the twilight, but not when it was too dark so that you couldn't read the words. And I love that one, actually. I love moth. I love that time of day where I'm trying to catch when the light tips over into the dark, when the dark tips over into the light, depending on which end of the day you're at. And you never can quite get it. It's just like seconds when the balance changes.
We've got a few political questions coming through. This is from Mike in Bath, and he's asking both of you, how can art and words help in the campaign to tackle climate change and protect our planet, convincing politicians and businesses to act?
Jackie?
Convincing politicians to act. I think it's convincing voters to vote differently. I think the days of career politicians are over because they're proving to us day after day that they have nothing to offer. There's more ground up politics, ground up as in from the ground up, not grinding up politics these days. I think we need to have radical reform because I don't think there's something in Overstory where Richard Powers says no amount of argument can change a person's mind, only a good story can do that. And I think we need reform now because I think our politicians are intransigent, self-interested, and don't listen.
Yeah, I think that's a very good account of it, and I think the idea that culture can't change anything has the great effect of leaving all decision making in the hands of those in power. Eventually, that which looks to be a legislative change is catalyzed and triggered by hearts and by votes, and those are changed by many things, of which culture, in a broad sense, is one. But also, I've just seen. I mean, art does very little very often, but I've also seen how it can enter structures, systems, institutions, and communities, and change them dramatically. Rob Hopkins' lovely work on transition towns and imagination and stories' role in that spreading movement is a really good example of that. It's what Rebecca Solnit, as I often say, calls hope in the dark, and we need that right now. Yeah.
And I think also everything begins with imagination, because in order to have change, you have to imagine a different way forward first. Yeah.
A sort of related point, and it's probably the last one.
Who've turned up this year. It's such a strange intimacy, this, but it's such a privilege as well. An absolute joy to be speaking around the world to you all, and thanks to everyone involved. I honestly, I'm not going to answer that because I don't know, and it's sort of a little bit like I was saying earlier. If you predict the outcomes, then then you limit the outcomes. So I don't know if it makes one child write and paint and feel proud to know and thrilled to know what a jackdaw is, that it isn't a rook or a raven or a crow. That'll be enough for me for the time being.
Can I just jump in? Amber Holmes, age 9, has asked a beautiful question for Jackie, just to finish off. Jackie, she asks, how does it feel when you draw? When I draw, I feel calm and relaxed.
Yes, I feel complete. I did once say that I'm only ever truly happy when I'm in conversation with paper, and whether that is reading or writing or painting, I'm not sure. All of them. Can't do them all at the same time, but I love watching the way pigment comes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rob and Jackie. Don't go audience yet. with a fabulous Lost Words blessing, a most beautiful piece of music from the Lost Words that you can find in spell songs, you can find online and Spotify and so forth. But thank you, Rob and Jackie, for an amazing evening in your company. Thank you for writing and drawing and painting this beautiful, beautiful, incredibly powerful book, The Lost Spells. Thank you to the team at Penguin Live for sorting it all out. Thanks to Chloe and Justin in particular, and to Vicky too. And there are more Penguin Live events at penguin.co.uk. And you can share your reading spells, you know, with all the usual hashtag, The Lost Spells. So get sharing. I'm sure this is just the beginning as this book floats out, takes root, takes flight out into the world. Thank you, everyone. And here is the blessing. Good evening.